So this was a very extraordinary threat from the President of the United States.
Holly, Qasem Soleimani directed mass murder. Are there people in the region who are actually celebrating?
You know, it's interesting, Margaret, when it comes to regional reactions. Israel is pleased. The Israeli government has praised President Trump for his, quote, decisive action. But when it comes to other countries, even those that feared and loathed Qasem Soleimani when he was alive, they seem to be concerned about the repercussions of this assassination. Take, for instance, Saudi Arabia, arch foe of Iran. It is urging restraint and says it's worried about escalation. We also spoke with two Iraqi lawmakers today. They are not friends of Iran or its influence in this country. In fact, they're very supportive of the U.S. military presence here, but they told us they are frustrated by American actions and fearful that Iraq is going to turn into a battlefield for a proxy war between Iran and the United States.
Holly and David, thank you. We turn now to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Good morning to you, Mr. Secretary.
Margaret, good to be with you. Thanks for having me on the show this morning.
Does eliminating Qasem Soleimani take out the specific plot that you say was an imminent threat?
Margaret, we made the right decision to take out this terrorist. He not only caused enormous death and destruction throughout the region, killed hundreds of Americans over the years, but had done so in the past couple of days, killed an American on December 27th. We watched him continue to actively build out for what was going to be a significant attack. That's what we believed, and we made the right decision.
But
as General Milley said,
has it been eliminated?
There are constant threats. We've been under threat from the Islamic Republic of Iran since at least 2015, when the previous administration made the mistake of entering that horrific nuclear deal and gave money and resources to this regime. The threats remain, and we'll continue to take actions to respond to them.
So Iran can still carry out that specific threat you described as imminent. Is it still imminent?
Margaret, we continue to prepare for whatever it is the Iranian regime may put in front of us within the next 10 minutes, within the next 10 days, and within the next 10 weeks. We are focused on delivering a strategy for the American people. We're going to get it right in a moment, but we're more importantly going to get it right over the days and weeks and months ahead. We have put Iran in a position it has not been in before. It is under enormous pressure, and we are continuing to be successful at denying them the resources to conduct precisely the types of campaign that we're confronting as a direct result of what happened over the past 8 years before we came into office.
Up until this point, the U.S. had avoided specifically targeting and taking out top Iranian military leaders. Were all of the president's national security advisors in full agreement that Qasem Soleimani need to be killed?
Yes.
Complete agreement across the cabinet?
It was a collective decision. It was intelligence analysis that doing nothing created far more risk than the action.
But doing nothing isn't the same as saying specifically Qasem Soleimani needed to be killed.
Margaret, there was unanimity that we were making the right decision that day. It was based not only on this intelligence, but you need to look no further than the days that led up to this. Qasem Soleimani led and orchestrated a Kataib Hezbollah attack on an American that killed an American. There was sound and just and legal reason for the actions the president took, and the world is safer as a result of the bold action that President Trump took.
President Trump is saying that there are 52 sites that the U.S. would target if Iran retaliates. How is that consistent with what you say is your message of de-escalation?
Entirely consistent.
Threatening to bomb mainland Iran?
The Iranian leadership needs to understand that attacking Americans is not cost-free.
It is not cost-free. And the fact of the matter is, whenever you have to make decisions like this, sometimes you have to choose between the lesser of the two evils of would it have been wrong to have let him live because of his actions? Or would it have been wronger to not punish him for his actions? It is that entity over there that is wanting to beat the drums and the tinkle sounds of war. They're the ones that are upset because Obama promised them something, and once people looked at that in a more clear, microscopic way, they realized that this may not have been the greatest decision to make because of the type of people that you're dealing with towards giving them nuclear capability. And it was this administration, the Trump administration, that basically went in and pulled the biscuit out of their mouth after Obama put it in their mouth. And because of it, they are at rage. They are at rage. Because the primary reason, if the truth be known, wasn't to gain nuclear power so that they could provide adequate power to their region. It was so that if they solely wanted, they could hold the country of Israel, that whole area over there where Christ come from, they could hold them hostage, and the next thing you know, they would be powerless because of that type of threat. It was the Obama administration that has put the world in a peril towards what we're dealing with right now. I said that over the phone, leaving a message with Homeland Security that it was Obama's administration that we have to blame for what we're looking at right now over in that district, over in that territory. Once more, it's not as simple as a lot of people think. A lot of people think, well, it's a cut and dry decision. You know, we're going to do it or we're not going to do it. No, sometimes looking at it from a military strategy, you got to choose the lesser of the two evils. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it's the truth. Because you have to weigh out the pros and the cons pertaining to the needs of the many. Do they outweigh the needs of the few? Do the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many? Whenever you're dealing with human carnage, human casualties here that have already been proven in the past of what this guy was capable of, you have to put all that into the same equation whenever you're making these decisions. It's as simple as that. You have to defend the innocent. And if you got somebody on a whirlwind of wanting to harm and hurt and bring injustice in people's lives, you have to deal with it effectively, precisely, decisively, and as quickly as you can possibly get it through with. If there is consequences that happens because of that decision, once more, you have to look at it from a broad lens and not a narrow lens. The broad lens is what caused them to do this to begin with. Well, you go back and you find the proof towards what this individual and his party has been a part of. I'm pretty sure that it was all thought out before, up there in the Pentagon, before that decision was ever made. I'm pretty sure that they know that there was going to be consequences possibly once they done this. And it's not just from a social standpoint as far as the people rearing up about it, but there could actually be severe, dire consequences.
Setting out conditions to say, these are our expectations. These are the things that America is expecting from you. And if you don't do them, the cost will be clear and direct. And we have an obligation to speak to the Iranian leadership clearly and directly so that they understand that America is prepared, that we will continue to keep the American people safe, that we will reduce threats throughout the region if they take certain actions. So they're entirely consistent. The entire strategy has been one of deterrence. to convince the Iranians that it would be so costly and to support the Iranian people so that they could see that what their leadership was doing was destroying their country.
But they're not
we've been
Why
very
do
effective
you
at
think
this.
that this will make them back down? Isn't this such a threat to Iranian pride to have one of their most powerful leaders killed? Doesn't it
Qasem
force them?
Soleimani killed hundreds of Americans. To take a terrorist off the battlefield does not increase the risk of terror. The risk of terror is increased by appeasement. That's what the Obama-Biden administration did. It's what President Trump will never do, Mark.
Well, he also killed thousands of people in the region. He directed mass murder.
Hundreds of thousands, a massacre in Syria. Absolutely true.
Does this mean other Iranian leaders are now potential U.S. targets?
We're going to do everything required to keep the American people safe.
That sounds like a yes.
No, you put it in his.
We're going to do.
The woman that's doing the interviewing, should not have made that statement. Back it up.
Under President Trump, what he has directed for months.
Back it up. Stop.
To keep the American people safe.
That sounds like a yes.
We're going to
See what she's doing? She's prompting him. Hello? Can I get the answer that I'm looking for out of you? Hello? Let's back it up one more time. Back it up. Back it up. Stop right
People
there.
in the region. He directed mass murder.
Hundreds of thousands, a massacre in Syria. Absolutely true.
Does this mean other Iranian leaders are now potential U.S. targets?
We're going to do everything required to keep the American people safe.
That sounds like a yes.
No, it sounds like a yes to her. But once more, she's trying to influence her viewers, which is us, including myself, that what the Secretary of State here was saying was yes on Face the Nation. People try to manipulate people's answers by not only their questions, but if they're not satisfied in the answer, then they'll try to put things in people's mouths. It's a form of manipulation. And Donald Trump is very, very correct whenever it comes to fake news towards people that are interviewing people that want to sit there and take things out of context towards what that person actually said and what that person actually meant. Once more, it's not as easy as a lot of people think whenever you're making these type of decisions, because sometimes it's not a cut and dry open answer. Sometimes the answer has to rely upon which is the lesser of the two evils. To let the guy go, and knowing that he's going to continue to do more of it, in which there's been proof that he already had plans of wanting to do some more destruction to American lives, or to cease and assist the problem. That's what's wrong with our country today. I personally feel like, and which once more, I'm not trying to manipulate nobody, but whenever you have people that appeases these type of actions, I'm going to use the situation that I've been dealing with out here at 291 Thompson Road. If Tommy Moore, the judicial system, would have come down on a certain group of people that had done already taken my brother down on his own property and tried to take his own gun and end his own life. If the court system would have been fair, if the court system would have not appeased that situation and made an example out of certain individuals that had done that, I, in the year 2014, that come back to 291 Thompson Road, would not have had to have dealt with these same issues coming from these same group of people. because the court systems would have stood up and said, you people down there have walked all over the Jacksons' rights, and because of it, you're going to pay the consequences. Well, whenever you don't do that, and you're appeasing what's going on, it evolves, it grows, it gets worse, it intensifies. That's what happened in my particular situation here at 291 Thompson Road pertaining to the judicial system. And I basically walked into an entrapment, not realizing that all that had went on in the past pertaining to my brother, my younger brother David, also my older brother Danny. Also, there was some conflict out here with my father too, with the same group of people that I'm talking about. But I basically walked into a beehive that had already done been kicked, to the point that whenever I come back, man, I was just a target from day one. I mean, an absolute target. Once more, if things would have been handled properly with the judicial system, the courts, I don't think I would have walked back into such of a hostile, sick environment. That's what the Secretary of State here is saying. Sometimes, whenever making decisions on government policies, if you appease it, if you let it get worse, if you let it evolve without some sort of consequences, then the next thing you know, what's the next thing that they're going to be doing? What's the next step that they're going to try to get away with? You know, what's the old saying? If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. That's exactly what happens with these evildoers. If you give these evildoers an inch, they take a mile. I just got off with a conversation a while ago yesterday with a neighbor down the road here. Miss May Norton, and her husband. I had to go yesterday and pick up some dog food for Mr. Norton because he's been down in his back and he's got animals to have to feed. So I volunteered towards going up to Walmart and picking up 3 50-pound bags of dog food for him for basically good gestures, being neighborly, under the Good Samaritan involvement. But while we was talking about all the problems that had happened out here on this property. And she said that they basically targeted her back years ago whenever she was working at Goodyear. And she was working, I guess, either the second or the third shift. And they would come out there on motorcycles and 3-wheelers and 4-wheelers and everything else and deliberately, in her mind's eye, deliberately make a bunch of noise, keeping her up to the point that she couldn't get no sleep. She couldn't get no rest, even though she was going to work every day. Well, she had to put her foot down to the Davis family that was out there doing all that, to the extent of basically threatening them towards saying the next time that she called them out there in front of the yard like that, she's going to shoot the air out of the tires with a gun. Whenever you're dealing with people that don't have no consideration for other people's feelings, or knowing what's going on pertaining to the neighborhood. We've got a whole woods out here, folks. We've got thousands and thousands and thousands of acres down here on the Beach Ridge bottom that you can go down there and make all the noise you want. And I promise you, won't nobody say a word. You can get out there and rip and romp and tear and hoot and holler and blow horns and act like an idiot if that's what you want to do all day long. And ain't nobody going to say a word. But whenever you're intentionally terrorizing people's lives, tormenting people's lives, that is a form of a hate crime. The same thing like the mayor up in New York City just got through issuing out pertaining to the Jewish synagogues up there. You cannot target a person or a group or a family simply because you think that you can target them and get away with it. That's exactly what the people over there in that district are doing. They're targeting various Americans towards thinking that what they're doing, that they can get away with it. Trump and his administration is saying you're not going to get away with this any longer.
We're going to do under President Trump what he has directed for months. We're going to execute our national security strategy and convince the people of Iran that we are with them and the Islamic Republic regime leadership, that their terrorism will not benefit them.
Iraq this morning has been carrying out some votes and debate over the presence of U.S. troops. And now the question is, if Iraq legally requires, this is what they're looking at, U.S. troops to leave, will the U.S. comply?
Well, I don't want to speculate about what the Iraqi leadership will do. We'll watch. We're following very closely what's taking place in the Iraqi parliament. Make no mistake about it. The Iraqi people, too, are protesting, but not against America. What you see on TV
is
happening at the direction.
Iraq who is
yes,
talking about this right now. Expelling 5,000 U.S. troops.
The acting prime minister of Iraq, who resigned because of massive Iranian interference in his own government's ability to execute sovereignty and independence for Iraq. It's why he left.
But the Iraqi parliament has now voted to approve it.
It is the United States that is prepared to help the Iraqi people get what it is they deserve and continue our mission there to take down terrorism from ISIS and others in the region that is in defense of the Iraqi people and is good for America too.
So I hear you saying the U.S. wants to keep those troops there and will work on that. What are you doing diplomatically behind the scenes to try to de-escalate?
Well, it's not just behind the scenes. We're doing some of it publicly too. The messages,
have you reached out to the regime?
The messages that were the Iranian leadership, including my counterpart, knows precisely what President Trump believes, wants, and desires, and is demanding from the Iranian leadership. Make no mistake about it. But it's not just the last few days, Margaret. This is something we've been working on for an awfully long time.
Sure.
We've built out an enormous coalition. Gulf states, Israel. We built out a maritime coalition. We've got an air defense initiative that is a multi-country effort. We've flowed American forces, but we've had forces coming in from our European friends and partners as well, and the Canadians. This is a multi-country, global diplomatic effort.
But for the first time since World War II, the U.S. has now taken out a foreign military leader on foreign soil.
He's a terrorist.
It may be, but this is a significant action. Do you really believe that Iran's going to sit down and negotiate now?
Depends how smart they are. It depends how much they take seriously what President Trump has communicated. If they take it seriously, they'll do the right thing. They will not continue to threaten not only Americans, but the entire region. The instability that they have created for our ally Israel, for our partners, the Saudis, our friends, the Emiratis, all of these countries. Soleimani and his band of merry brothers have been a negative influence in the region for an awfully long time, and they are thankful for the action that America took.
The details of the threat that you describe as imminent, and it sounds like you were also saying is ongoing, have not been shared with Congress. The details that were transmitted yesterday were kept classified. When will the American people know why President Trump decided to do what he did?
Morgan, those aren't the same thing. You said they have been kept from Congress and kept classified. They have been shared with Congress. The congressional leadership has certainly seen it. Those members who have come back will get to see most all of that same information. I don't think any reasonable American elected official would see what President Trump and I and Secretary Esper saw and conclude that we could have done anything but the action that we took. And
will that be declassified and explained to the American public?
And Margaret, we will do our best. We understand the obligation to share with the American people why it is we're taking the actions we can, and we will do so. President Trump has done so in tweets. I've done so in messages. I'm sitting here with you today articulating why it is in America's best interest the action we took. As for specific pieces of intelligence, you and I both know. I was a director of the CIA. There are things you simply cannot share. There are valuable information streams that we must protect. We will need them in the days and weeks ahead, and we will never present the risk to the United States by putting at risk that valuable information.
But to be clear, that threat continues to exist? That plot?
There remain an enormous set of risks in the region, and America is preparing for each and every one of them. That includes not only the threats from the proxy militias in Iraq, but in the region more broadly, along every vector, including cyber.
Secretary Pompeo, thank you for joining us this
Margaret,
morning.
thank you very much for having me on.
We'll be back in 1 minute with Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio. He's standing by.
Beyond.
I guess she done all right in that interview, but she was trying to prompt the Secretary of State in some of his answers and taking some of his reasoning and questioning it. And I didn't like that about the way that she was pushing herself onto him towards trying to get answers from him of his intentions that by and large he may not be at liberty to say. Whenever you're dealing with sensitive situations like this, every iota, every dotted I and crossed T makes and could make a very, very significant difference on the perspective of going either one way or the other. Whenever it comes to the interpreter, towards how people interpret what an individual has said in regard to their intent. What did they intend to say, and what motivated them in saying what they said in their intent goes a long way, a long, long way whenever somebody can read through somebody's motives. I still think that those people over there, it's not so much that they're ignorant whenever it comes to not knowing what a true martyr is, but it's that they have been taught incorrectly towards understanding what a martyr is. A martyr is someone who gets innocently killed or goes through horrible, horrible situations that they did not deserve, such as Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ did not deserve to be executed. Jesus Christ did not deserve to be treated the way that he was treated in the trial. One of the most unjust trials in the world. That's what makes a martyr a martyr. Martin Luther King was assassinated right down here on the streets of Memphis. Killed in broad daylight. He was a martyr. People that sustain this type of action for no reason or for an unjustifiable reason, it turns them into a martyr. The people over there in that area don't know what a true martyr is. They have been taught incorrectly. It is a very, very crucial, sensitive situation either way. And it speaks volumes about where we are here in the year 2020 in the 21st century. It speaks volumes.
We got the diagnosis and found out she had cerebral palsy. And we were really scared.
There was nothing in me that was
told to the American people as the peace guy.
Joy, you mentioned earlier one of the big challenges for Donald Trump is that unlike 20 years ago, there is an isolationist current within the Republican Party, obviously in the Democratic Party.
The country, the Sunni Arabs, the Kurds. What is this going to mean to the fight against ISIS? So a very complex situation, and the ball right now is in the court of what is a caretaker government, Becky.
That's right, and the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, say on Fox just after that vote, and I quote, "The resigned Prime Minister in Iraq is under pressure from Iran," he says. Fred, Iran very keen for us to see these pictures, of course, I'm going to show now. And the IRGC claiming that the ceremony for Soleimani, slated to take place at Tehran's Grand Mosala tonight, has been cancelled because there are simply, they say, too many people slowing the procession down. Are these crowds genuine, or are they being encouraged out onto the streets?
Well, Becky, they certainly are being encouraged, but even crowds that get encouraged, and certainly the Iranian authorities do encourage at certain times people to come out for demonstrations, people to come out for events. Even if they did encourage people, they would not be able to garner the kind of crowds that we're seeing there on the streets of various towns in Iran. That goes well above anything that the government here and that the religious leadership here could have hoped for and could have imagined would happen. If you look at, for instance, the town of Ahvaz, which was the first place that Qasem Soleimani's body went earlier today, there are people there who say that hundreds of thousands came out to line the streets there, to be on the streets, to be part of that morning procession. And keep in mind, Ahvaz is a town that only a couple of weeks ago had anti-government demonstrations going on. So you can see what a unifying figure Qasem Soleimani was, what a respected figure Qasem Soleimani was for many Iranians. There were certainly maybe people who were critical of him as well, but for a vast majority of people, he certainly was a very unifying figure. And the reason why, Becky, that event tonight at the Mosala, the Grand Mosque in the Mosala area here in Tehran, was being called off is because there are so many people who are coming to where the body is right now in Mashhad. There are people who are saying also hundreds of thousands are there in Mashhad to also pay their final respects to Qasem Soleimani. So certainly a towering figure for many Iranians, and first and foremost someone who's remembered by many Iranians for having played such a key role in the fight against ISIS. And they certainly remember the times when ISIS was at the gates of Baghdad and threatening to get into the Iraqi capital. And Qasem Soleimani then came in and drummed up those very Shiite militias that now are having such trouble with the United States, or are in such a clinch with the United States. And certainly many people here believe that he was the guarantor of stability for this nation. And that's not something that just transcends religious circles here in Iran, but certainly more moderate and secular circles as well. There are a lot of people in this country who do respect, and many also who do revere Qasem Soleimani. And of course, a lot of them coming out to mourn Qasem Soleimani. And certainly we expect a lot more of them to be on the streets tomorrow when his body is expected to arrive here, Becky.
Well, that is the perspective in Tehran. Fred, thank you. Jumana, really appreciate it. Jumana is at the Iraqi parliament there in Baghdad. Coming up on Connect the World, destroyed homes and scorched land. We're going to move away from the top story for you for just a moment, because this is really important. Australian bushfires have already left behind so much devastation, and the country's leader taking heavy criticism for his handling of what is this deadly crisis. And Italy says the EU needs to speak with one voice on the fallout from the US airstrike in Iraq, but can the European Union agree on the matter?
Does holding your tab...
It's really sad whenever we're dealing with so much confusion that you don't have to be some sort of a brain scientist to realize that this confusion is basically activated through the spirit of the Antichrist. The Bible is very clear in telling people that Satan is the author of confusion. And if he can continue to bamboozle and cause that much more confusion in the eyes of the people, then naturally things is going to become that much more toxic in a unstable environment. And I ain't gonna lie to you, I think that it's done intentionally by the Antichrist forces that's deliberately trying to get all this stuff stirred up to the point that possibly something major does develop out of all this. There has to be some sort of a hidden agenda pertaining to just recently, just within the past few years, we have seen not only anti-Semitism explode all over the planet, especially here in the countryside, but we have seen all these other troubles that has escalated through the UN and other governments that have just went through intolerable situations with their citizens in trying to resolve their problems. This has been something that has just recently just escalated just within the past 2 to 5 years. And it's sad, really sad, because the more that it escalates, the more temperamental that it becomes.
That happened just a short time ago. Well, that decision comes.
Let's back this up. Right there.
Following the US drone strike that killed Iran's top military man, Qasem Soleimani, in Baghdad, Iraq's parliament voted in favor of instructing the government to seek the withdrawal of thousands of US troops from military bases in the country. That happened just a short time ago. Well, that decision comes while the US is sending nearly 3,000 more troops to the region. Along with that, US President Trump warning Tehran, if it retaliates, that the US will target dozens of sites in Iran. Meanwhile, the European Union is calling for calm, both in Iraq and in the Middle East region after the fateful...
Did you hear what they just voted? Listen to it again.
US airstrike.
This is significant. Listen to it again.
Instructing the government to seek the withdrawal of thousands of US troops from military bases in the country. That happened.
Withdraw thousands. Thousands.
Happened just a short time ago. Well, that decision comes while the US is sending nearly 3,000 more troops to the region. Along with that, US President Trump warning Tehran, if it retaliates, that the US will target dozens of sites in Iran. Meanwhile, the European Union is calling for calm, both in Iraq and in the Middle East region after the fateful US airstrike. In an effort towards it, the European Union's Foreign Affairs Chief has invited Iran's foreign minister to Brussels for a meeting. They spoke on the phone about the need for de-escalation and preserving the nuclear deal. Soleimani's death, however, deepening long-term divisions, it seems, between two major powers in the Western Hemisphere, the US and the EU. CNN's senior diplomatic editor Nick Robertson has the details on that.
Even before the burial of Qasem Soleimani, rancor between the US and some allies is breaking out. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo dismissive of European allies.
Frankly, the Europeans haven't been as helpful as I wish that they could be. The Brits, the French, the Germans all need to understand that what we did, what the Americans did, saved lives in Europe as well.
The reality is, killing Soleimani is deepening divisions that began during Trump's presidency, isolating the US from valuable support. France describing the current tensions as of the US's making.
It's the next step in an escalation which has been going on for months. What is happening is what we feared. Tensions between the United States and Iran are increasing.
Germany saying the situation pushed to crisis point.
We stand before a dangerous escalation. Now it is crucial to contribute to a de-escalation in a cautious and considerate manner.
Even the UK's hawkish foreign minister calling for calm, saying we urge all parties to de-escalate. Further conflict is in none of our interests. His predecessor outrightly critical.
Well, it's an incredibly dangerous game of chicken that's going on at the moment because both sides have calculated that the other side cannot afford and doesn't want to go to war.
None of the rancor bodes well for handling Iran's inevitable reprisal. Gaps began growing a year and a half ago when Trump pulled out of the multinational Iran nuclear deal and doubled down on sanctions, as Europeans stuck to the deal and created financial workarounds to keep business with Iran going. And last summer, only the Brits bent to Trump's will following Iranian aggression in the Strait of Hormuz and joined a handful of allies beefing maritime security. Soleimani's killing threatens to strain already awkward EU-US and fractures NATO-US relations further. NATO announced Saturday it was suspending US-desired training for Iraqi forces. Allies as far away as Australia unhappy, their regional staff unreasonably exposed to danger.
The United States took this action based on their own information, and they took that action without discussing it with partners.
Perspective from two other world capitals. Matthew Chance joining us from Moscow. First up, though, Nick Robertson joining us from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And Nick, what is going on diplomatically in the Middle East region at this point? What's going on behind the scenes?
You know, I think what's going on behind the scenes, there's a lot of phone calls being made between various capitals. You certainly have the European powers who are trying to sort of continue to have a dialogue, a meaningful dialogue with Iran. They all want to see, as they do here in the region, they want to see this situation escalate no further. There is common agreement that it is in a very, very precarious and dangerous situation. You have the Deputy Defense Minister, the brother of the Crown Prince, traveling to London and to Washington later this week from Saudi Arabia. So there are a lot of conversations going on in the background, but really people are reacting to the situation as it is changing. The NATO calling a meeting of the North Atlantic Council on Monday afternoon, and the efforts to sort of draw in Iran to dialogue, to talk it off the edge, if you will, of taking further action. That just seems to be incredibly unlikely at the moment. Iran is committed publicly to taking some kind of revenge, and that just is not the diplomatic path that anyone wants to see them go down.
And let's get to Moscow, because as we listen to Nick's description of what is going on behind the scenes, Moscow sitting back, one assumes, and sort of letting this play out. Where will it see its irons, as it were, in this fire?
Well, I mean, look, there's undoubtedly some short-term advantage that the Russians are seeing in all of this, not least the fact that it's watching, I expect with some glee, the fact that the traditional allies of the United States, the European countries we've just been talking about and seeing in that report, at odds with the United States. And it's always been an overarching sort of foreign policy objective of the Russians to drive a wedge somehow in between Western institutions, like NATO and like Western military alliances, things like that, and they're watching that unfold in front of their eyes. But, you know, they're not exactly rubbing their hands with glee because they're deeply concerned as well. What they don't want to see, and remember, Russia has a strong relationship with Iran. It's a big diplomatic supporter. It fights side by side with Iran on the ground in Syria to protect their joint ally. They've got an economic and a military relationship. And what it doesn't want to see is for this situation to spiral out of control, for a confrontation to emerge directly between the United States and Iran, and for regime change to take place in Tehran. They've seen it elsewhere. They've seen it in Iraq. They've seen it in Libya. They intervened militarily to prevent it from happening in Syria, and they definitely don't want to see it happening in the weeks or in the months ahead in Tehran, again, one of their key allies in the region.
To both of you, thank you. The view from Moscow and from Riyadh this evening. You're watching Connect the World. I'm Becky Anderson. Still to come, well, Tehran threatens retaliation, as America says it already has potential Iranian targets in sight. More on our top story after this.
Good luck to all of us. Once more, obviously, somebody didn't want peace. If they did have, if they would have, I feel like that the ministry out here would have been as powerful as any other international known Christ-like type ministry in the world. But because certain individuals thought that I was AWOL, beginning with Kenton, Tennessee, within about 7 miles from where I live, they have put this planet in jeopardy.